Hello, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy. Tuesday nights, such as this, are nights for our show on the international system. And tonight, I want to discuss two things. First of all, Russia's BRICS vision. And second of all, the possibility of a China-US war coming up. Like we don't have enough wars that we're involved in at this point. So, and give me a second here. Okay, I just wanted to share that to Facebook for a moment. And who's ever out there, I know there are a few of you. Hello. There's Andy Candy. Hi, Bonnie, Joe, and Dee. I'm present, but changing diapers, doing baby stuff, hands full. Thank you for coming, Andy. There are a couple of other people here too, but I don't know which ones. Dee is not here yet, but she should be here later. She's winding up her 8 o'clock show. So I'm going to start this show off with Russia's BRICS vision. This is a piece, from RT. Used to be known as Russia Today, an official news outlet of the Russian government. And the headline is Russia outlines future vision for BRICS. It is dated 26th of December 2023 at 5:42. The tagline is the group, that is BRICS, does not need to be transformed into, quote, an organization with a secretariat, Russia's foreign minister has said. Of course, the foreign minister is Sergei Lavrov, showing a somber face there. Or maybe it's just a poker face. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov attends a press conference in Rome, Italy, on February 18th, 2020. BRICS. Okay, by the way, I just have to say this about, Sergei Lavrov. He is like the world's outstanding foreign minister at this point. I do not think there is any other foreign minister as brilliant as Sergei Lavrov is. Anyway, just personal opinion. BRICS should not be transformed from a gathering of states into a full-fledged organization with a secretariat. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has said in an interview with the Russian TV channel NTV, Sergei Lavrov said, quote, BRICS is not an organization, but an association, unquote. The foreign minister noted that he doesn't think anyone has any interest in turning it into, quote, a real organization with a secretariat, unquote, adding that, quote, this is not necessary, at least at this stage, and in his opinion will not be needed, quote, for a relatively long time, unquote. So we can infer from that Sergei Lavrov doesn't think it's going to be needed over the next few months, certainly. The minister called the association, quote, a future umbrella, unquote, noting that BRICS is, quote, a symbol and the desire of the world's majority developing their initiatives, taking into account each other's interests, unquote. Quote again, there are no organizations in the West that have fair rules in the sense of equality and genuine consensus, Lavrov added, recalling a recent episode in which German Chancellor Olaf Scholz reportedly told Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban to, quote, grab a coffee, unquote, at a key meeting of EU leaders in Brussels so that he would not veto a motion to begin formal accession talks with Ukraine. Russia will preside over BRICS in 2024. The group currently includes Russia, Brazil, India, China, and South Africa. Starting January 1st, the association will be joined by Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia. Argentina said it will not be joining BRICS as planned. Argentine President Javier Milei has expressed a reluctance to support economic ties with China and Brazil and is planning to work towards economic rapprochement with the U.S. and Israel. Talk about choosing the wrong side here. In total, more than 40 countries have so far expressed interest in joining BRICS. According to 2023 chair South Africa, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov said in early October that BRICS plans to compile a list of candidates for the Union's partner state status ahead of the upcoming summit in the Russian city of Kazan in 2024. According to the official, one of the priorities of Russia's chairmanship in BRICS next year will be focusing on expanding the, quote, circle of BRICS friends, unquote. Further, including countries in Latin America, as well as the increase of payments in national currencies. So they'll be doing more trading in national currencies rather than in dollars. In an interview with the China Media Group in October, Russian President Vladimir Putin said BRICS was being expanded in accordance with the global multipolarity principle. According to Putin, no nation wants to be on the sidelines and act on the whim of some sovereign, and BRICS is a platform where countries can relate to one another as equals. And that's the story, emphasizing multipolarity, nations relating to each other, as equals, increasing business, in national currencies, a development that, is very rapid, and a minimum of formal organization, replacing formal organization with association, and collaborative association. And with the idea of fair rules, unlike other formal organizations that have been set up by the collective West. So I thought that vision was interesting. I thought it was interesting that it was Lavrov who communicated that vision to the whole world. That, of course, is what a foreign minister should do. And it's significant that Putin let him do that, or wanted him to do that. It's also significant that the objective here during the Russian presidency in 2024, the Russian presidency for BRICS, is going to be for BRICS to grow with partner states and circles, of friends of BRICS. So BRICS is going to be on the move. On the other hand, it doesn't look like economic associations in the West are going to be on the move. I thought it was very significant to emphasize that. Now, going on to the big story for the night. It is a story about the possibilities of China-US war. Hey, Kay, good to see you. So, let me put it up on the screen. It's a piece, Kay, from LA Progressive. The title of it is a question. Will there be another major war in 2024? Another major war in 2024? Question mark. Top leaders in both Beijing and Washington were becoming ever more concerned that a major US-China crisis, and certainly a war, would prove catastrophic for all involved. This was published on December 21st, 2023 by Michael Clark. There's the USA Eagle and the Chinese Dragon crushing smaller actors between the two of them. This cartoon came from the Salt Lake Tribune, kccartoons.com. You can see the dragon clearly right now. And the statement, at least they're talking. I guess we all should be somewhat grateful for that, if they really are talking. They were talking on November 15th. This hasn't exactly been a year of good news when it comes to our war-torn, beleaguered planet. But on November 15th, US President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping took one small step back from the precipice. Until they talked in a mansion near San Francisco, it seemed as if their countries were locked in a downward spiral of taunts and provocations that might, many experts feared, result in a full-blown crisis, even a war, even, God save us all, the world's first nuclear war. Thanks to that encounter, though, such dangers appear to have receded. Still, a looming question facing both countries is whether that retreat from disaster, what the Chinese are now calling the, quote, San Francisco vision, unquote, will last through 2024. Prior to the summit, there seemed a few discernible obstacles to some kind of train wreck, whether complete breakdown in relations, a disastrous trade war, or even a military clash over Taiwan or contested islands in the South China Sea. beginning with last February's Chinese balloon incident and continuing with a series of bitter trade disputes and recurring naval and air incidents over the summer and fall. It seemed as though events were leading with a certain grim inevitability toward some sort of catastrophe. After one such incident last spring, New York Times columnist Thomas Friedman warned that, quote, the smallest misstep by either side could ignite a U.S.-China war that would make Ukraine look like a neighborhood dust-up, unquote. In recent months, top leaders in both Beijing and Washington were becoming ever more concerned that a major U.S.-China crisis, and certainly a war, would prove catastrophic for all involved. Even a major trade war, they understood, would create economic chaos on both sides of the Pacific. A complete breakdown in relations would undermine any efforts to come to grips with the climate crisis, prevent new pandemics, or disrupt illegal drug networks. And a war? Well, every authoritative non-governmental simulation of U.S.-China conflict has ended in staggering losses for both sides, as well as a significant possibility of nuclear escalation. And there's no reason to assume that simulations conducted by the American and Chinese militaries have turned out any differently. Here I have to add that it's fairly well-known news that simulations carried out by the U.S. military generally show that in any conflict between the United States and China over Taiwan, that China would win that conflict and the United States would lose. As summer turned into fall, both sides were still searching for a mutually acceptable, quote, off-ramp, unquote, from catastrophe. For months, top officials had been visiting each other's capitals in a frantic effort to bring a growing sense of crisis under control. Secretary of State Antony Blinken traveled to Beijing in June, a trip rescheduled after he canceled a February visit thanks to the balloon incident. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen arrived in July, and Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo in August. Similarly, Foreign Minister Wang Yi traveled to Washington in October. Their meetings, according to New York Times reporters Vivian Wang and David Pearson, were arranged, quote, in the hope of arresting the downward spiral, unquote, in relations and to pave the way for a Biden-Xi meeting that might truly ease tensions. Mission accomplished? Question mark. Not surprisingly, for both Biden and Xi, the primary objective of the San Francisco summit was to halt that downward spiral. As Xi reportedly asked Biden, quote, should the U.S. and China engage in mutually beneficial cooperation or antagonism and confrontation? This is a fundamental question on which disastrous mistakes must be avoided, unquote. From all accounts, it appears the two presidents did at least stop the slide toward confrontation while acknowledging that competition would continue unabated. Both sides agreed to, quote, manage, unquote, their differences in a, quote, responsible, unquote, manner and avoid conflict-inducing behavior. I have to say at this juncture that this does not give me a great deal of confidence because in relations between the United States and Russia, in recent years, the statements and commitments that have been made by the United States have just been hot air. Okay? The United States has not attempted to make those statements come true. Let's put it that way. Rather than saying that the United States plain lied. But let us point out that she, after seeing the way we treated the Russians, over a period of years, and seeing the way he was treated in international meetings with Tony Blinken, on other occasions, it is likely that she has very little faith in anything the United States has to say. And the reputation of Joe Biden for telling the truth in his communications with other leaders of other nations, his track record is not really strong in this respect. While the United States and China, quote, are in competition, unquote, Biden reportedly told Xi, quote, that the world expects the United States and China to manage competition responsibly to prevent it from veering into conflict, confrontation, or a new Cold War, unquote. Xi reportedly endorsed this precept, saying that China would strive to manage its differences with Washington in a peaceful fashion. In this spirit, Biden and Xi took several modest steps to improve relations and prevent incidents that might result in unintended conflict, including a Chinese promise to cooperate with the United States in combating the trade in the narcotic drug fentanyl and the resumption of high-level military-to-military communications. In a notable first, the two also, quote, affirmed the need to address the risks of advanced artificial intelligence systems and improve AI safety through U.S.-China government talks, unquote. They also put their stamp of approval on a series of cooperative steps agreed to by their climate envoys, John Kerry and Xie Zhenhua, to mutually combat climate change. Still, neither president agreed to any fundamental alterations in policy that might have truly shifted bilateral relations in a more cooperative direction. In fact, on the most crucial issues dividing the two countries, Taiwan, trade, and technology transfers, they made no progress. As Shui Gang, a China scholar at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, put it, whatever the two presidents did accomplish, quote, the Biden-Xi meeting will not change the direction of U.S.-China relations away from strategic competition, unquote. With that, still the defining constant in relations, and both leaders under immense pressure from domestic constituencies, the military, ultra-nationalist political factions, and assorted industry groups to hang tough on key bilateral issues. Don't be surprised if the slide towards crisis and confrontation regains momentum in 2024. The trials to come. Assuming U.S. and Chinese leaders remain committed to a non-confrontational stance, they will face powerful forces driving them ever closer to the abyss, including both seemingly intractable issues that divide their countries and deeply entrenched domestic interests, intent on provoking a confrontation. Although several highly contentious issues have the potential to ignite a crisis in 2024, the two with the greatest potential to provoke a disaster are Taiwan and territorial disputes in the South China Sea, a self-governing island that increasingly seeks to pursue its own destiny. Taiwan is viewed by Chinese officials as a renegade province that should rightfully fall under Beijing's control. when the U.S. established formal diplomatic relations with the People's Republic of China, PRC, in 1979, it acknowledged the Chinese position, quote, that there is one China and Taiwan is part of China, unquote. That, quote, one China, unquote, principle has remained Washington's official policy ever since, but is now under increasing pressure as ever more Chinese seek to abandon their ties with the PRC and establish a purely sovereign state, a step the Chinese leaders have repeatedly warned could result in a military response. Many American officials believe that Beijing will indeed launch an invasion of the island should the Taiwanese declare their independence, and that in turn could easily result in U.S. military intervention and a full scale war. For now, the Biden administration's response to a possible Chinese invasion is governed by a principle of, quote, strategic ambiguity, under which military intervention is implied but not guaranteed. According to the Taiwan Relations Act of 1979, any attempt by China to seize Taiwan by military means will be considered a matter of, quote, of grave concern to the United States, unquote, but not one automatically requiring a military response. In recent years, however, increasing numbers of prominent Washington politicians have called for the replacement of, quote, strategic ambiguity, unquote, with a doctrine of strategic clarity, unquote, which would include an unequivocal pledge to defend Taiwan in case of an invasion. President Biden has lent credence to this stance by repeatedly claiming that it is U.S. policy. It isn't, obliging his aides to increasingly walk back his words. To comment at this point, this is really asinine on Joe Biden's part. As I said earlier, all of the military simulations we have conducted, that we have received any leaks about or information about or that our public have shown that China would win every military conflict before the United States, any military conflict between the United States, okay, and China. There isn't a single simulation that shows the United States coming out ahead. I don't know if there are any in the private sector, but if there are, I'd like to see them. Of course, the question of how China and the U.S. would respond to a Taiwanese declaration of independence is yet to be put to the test. The island's current leadership, drawn from the pro-independence Democratic Progressive Party, the DPP, has so far accepted that given the way Taiwan is slowly achieving de facto independence through diplomatic outreach and economic prowess, there's no need to rush a formal declaration. But presidential elections in Taiwan this coming January and the possible emergence of another DPP-dominated administration could, some believe, trigger just such a move, or in anticipation of it, a Chinese invasion. Now, I have to say at this point, I don't think this is an accurate rendering of what is likely to go on. For example, I don't see any mention of the possibility that the election in early January of this year, January 13th, is likely to result not in the DPP winning, but in the Kuomintang Party winning. And the Kuomintang Party, the original political party that occupied Taiwan way back in 1950, that political party is for reunion with China and is likely to take concrete steps to promote the reunion with China, if it should take power in 2024, and as far as I've seen, the midterm results in the local elections and also polling seems to show that the Kuomintang are likely to win in 2024, though we will see what the truth is about this in a very brief time now. But it also should be mentioned, again, that the idea that Taiwan is slowly achieving de facto independence through diplomatic outreach and economic um, prowess is not what I've been seeing. What I've been seeing is that the economic relations between Taiwan and the mainland have been growing stronger and stronger as time goes on. This means that the dependence of Taiwan on mainland China from an economic dependence point of view, uh, that is becoming more and more the de facto state of economic relations between the two areas. So, with the economic integration of Taiwan and China getting stronger, how does it make any sense for the pro-independence party, even if it should win in 2024? How does it make any sense for them to try to declare their independence and make it stick? Should the DPP candidate, William Lai, win on January 13th, the Biden administration might come under enormous pressure from Republicans and many Democrats to already accelerate the already rapid pace of arms deliveries to the islands. Well, I guess here I have to point out we have huge demands for arms deliveries right at the moment, both for Ukraine and for the Israeli war, in Gaza. Both of these have some importance to the United States, though, of course, we're on the downward slide with respect to Ukraine as the Russians come closer and closer to victory. But still, there will be demands for weapons, on that side, and it is problematic whether we would be able to supply an already rapid pace of arms deliveries to Taiwan. The war, in Ukraine was very hard on us in providing arms, to Ukraine, most of which have already been destroyed. And it is very unlikely that we can reinforce Ukraine with substantial arms any time in the near future. The Israelis, too, are burning up armaments very, very rapidly, and our capacity to reinforce them over a period of time is likely to be problematic, as well. We have degraded over time the capability of our war manufacturing to respond to crises. The job of responding at an extremely rapid pace to three crises at once, three major crises, is likely to be beyond them. Anyway, going on. The acceleration of the already rapid pace of arms deliveries would be viewed by Beijing as tacit American support for an accelerated drive toward independence and presumably increase the inclination of Beijing to invade. In other words, Joe Biden could face a major military crisis remarkably early in 2024. The South China Sea dispute could produce a similar crisis in short order. That fracas stems from the fact that Beijing has declared sovereignty over nearly the entire South China Sea, an extension of the Western Pacific, bounded by China, Taiwan, the Philippines, Borneo, and Vietnam, along with the islands found within it. Such claims have been challenged by that sea's other bordering states, which argue that under international law, notably the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, they are entitled to sovereignty over the islands that fall within their individual, quote, exclusive economic zones, unquote, EEZs. In 2016, the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague ruled on a petition from the Philippines that China's claims were invalid and that the Philippines and its neighbors were indeed entitled to control their respective EEZs. China promptly both protested the ruling and announced its intention to disregard it. Chinese control over those islands and their surrounding waters would have significant economic and strategic implications. To begin with, it extends China's defense perimeter several hundred miles from its coastline, complicating any future U.S. plans to attack the mainland, while making a PRC assault on U.S. and allied bases in the regions far easier. The South China Sea also harbors major fisheries, an important source of sustenance for China and its neighbors, as well as vast reserves of oil and natural gas coveted by all the states in the region. China has consistently sought to monopolize those resources. To facilitate its control over the area, the PRC has established military installations on many of the islands. While using its Coast Guard and maritime uh, and maritime uh, uh, militias to drive off the fishing boats and oil drilling vessels of other states, even ramming some of those ships. On October 22nd, for example, a large Chinese Coast Guard vessel bumped into a smaller Philippine one, seeking to reinforce a small outpost of Philippines Marines located on the Second Thomas Shoal, which is an islet claimed by both countries. In reaction to such moves, officials in Washington have repeatedly asserted that the U.S. will assist allies affected by Chinese bullying, quote unquote. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin declared in July at a meeting with Australian officials in Brisbane, quote, we'll continue to support our allies and partners as they defend themselves from bullying behavior, unquote. 3 months later, following that clash at the Second Thomas Shoal, Washington reaffirmed its obligation to defend the Philippines under the 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty, should Filipino forces, ships, or aircraft come under armed attack, including, quote, those of its own Coast Guard, anywhere in the South China Sea, unquote. In other words, a future clash between Chinese vessels and those of one of Washington's treaty partners or close allies could easily escalate into a major confrontation. Just what form that might take or where it might lead is, of course, impossible to say. But it's worth noting that in recent South China Sea exercises, the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command has conducted large-scale combat drills involving multiple aircraft carriers, cruisers, destroyers, and submarines. Any U.S. military response on such a scale would undoubtedly prompt a comparable Chinese reaction, setting in motion a potential spiral of escalation, assuming that China continues its policy of harassing the fishing and exploration activities of its southern neighbors. A clash of this sort could occur at almost any time. Resisting bellicose impulses. Given the dangers in Taiwan and the South China Sea, Presidents Biden and Xi will have to exercise extreme patience and prudence to prevent the ignition of a full blown crisis in 2024. Hopefully, the understanding they developed in San Francisco, along with new crisis management tools like enhanced military to military communications, will help them manage any problems that do arise. Doing so, however, they will have to overcome both the escalatory dynamics built into those disputes and bellicose domestic pressures from powerful political and industrial factions that view intense military competition with the other side, if not necessarily war, as attractive and also necessary. In both the US and China, vast military industrial operations have blossomed. I don't know if I'd use that word exactly, blossomed, but fed by mammoth government disbursements intended to bolster their ability to defeat the other's military in all out high tech combat. In this hothouse environment, military bureaucracies and arms makers on each side have come to assume that perpetuating an environment of mutual suspicion and hostility could prove advantageous, leaving key politicians ever more obliged to shower them with money and power. I think the danger of this is much greater on the United States side than it is on the Chinese side. I may be mistaken about this, but I have the feeling that Xi Jinping has much greater power over Chinese corporations and the Chinese military industrial complex than President Joe Biden has over U.S. defense corporations and the military industrial complex, okay, of the United States, with its buying off of key politicians in Congress. I don't think China suffers from the buying off of key members of the Communist Party or key members of the Chinese government. They are still under top-down control, falling to the president, okay, of China. On December 13th and 14th, for example, the U.S. Senate and House, seemingly incapable of passing anything else, approved a record defense policy bill that authorized $886 billion in military spending in 2024, $28 billion more than in 2023. I'm surprised it was only that much greater, with most of the increase earmarked for ships, planes, and missiles intended primarily for a possible future war with China. I have to point out that is basically not the 886 billion, but the 28 billion. That is basically chicken feed compared to the money that's been being spent, okay, on the combination of Ukraine, okay, and Israel. So, American military leaders and politicians representing districts with a high concentration of defense contractors are sure to request even greater spending increases in future years to overcome, quote, the Chinese threat. A similar dynamic fuels the funding efforts of top Chinese military industrial officials, who no doubt are citing evidence of Washington's drive to overpower China to demand a reciprocal buildup, including all too ominously of their country's nuclear forces. In addition, in both countries, various political and media figures continue to benefit by harping on the, quote, China threat or the, quote, the America threat, unquote, adding to the pressure on top officials to take strong action in response to any perceived provocation by the other side. That being the case, Presidents Biden and Xi are likely to face a series of demanding challenges in 2024 from the seemingly intractable disputes between their two nations. Under the best of circumstances, perhaps they'll be able to avoid a major blow-up while making progress on less contentious issues like climate change and drug trafficking. To do so, however, they'll have to resist powerful forces of entrenched bellicosity. If they can't, the fierce wars in Ukraine and Gaza 2023 could end up looking like relatively minor events as the two great powers face off against each other in a conflict that could all too literally take this planet to hell and back. Fingers crossed. So this came out of Tom Dispatch, okay, originally. Again, okay, it's by Michael Clare. I think in certain ways it's off, okay, the mark. Uh, as I said, okay, I believe that Xi has much greater control of his military industrial complex than Biden has, okay, of his military um, um, industrial complex. Okay. On the other hand, as we move down the road here, it's quite likely that Biden will lose in the election of 2024 or that he will withdraw. Uh, we know, of course, that Trump, if he wins the presidency, uh, will most probably be more aggressive to China. He has been aggressive to China in the past when he was president. That is his track record. On the other hand, he's likely to get us out of Ukraine, thus perhaps freeing up some money, or he may perceive that he's freeing up some money that can be used for a China conflict. However, I have to say that when it comes to international relations, I think that Trump may have a survival instinct that Joe Biden does not have. I don't know if that's going to be very operational in the Middle East, unfortunately. I think that Trump is too personally involved there with Netanyahu. So if Netanyahu remains, Trump may still be heading up in a United States that is just as aggressive in supporting Netanyahu's policies, okay, as the current administration is. But okay, I also think that when it comes to China, maybe, just maybe, in a Trump administration, there would be less bellicosity because undoubtedly Trump will be advised that we don't really have a strong military position when it comes to a possible conflict over Taiwan, and that it is best to avoid that kind of crisis. I hope that's true. I hope there's a degree of common sense there in a new Trump administration, which did not exist in the old Trump administration. But as most of you know, uh, I'm certainly not hoping for a new Trump administration. We also must remember that any continued involvement in the war in Gaza creates its own risk, okay, of nuclear war. Things are likely to heat up there the more the genocide of the Palestinians continues. So there we are. I thought this article was very good. and pointing to the possibilities of a flare-up because of disputes about the ocean borderlands of China and the claims being made by China compared to the claims being made by other nations. Generally, I respect the common sense of China, especially when it comes to international relations, but I do not respect their decision to try to push the sea-based frontiers of China further and further out. The truth is that if they adhere to the decisions that are coming out of The Hague concerning where the borderlands are, they will be much more attractive a partner for those very countries to collaborate with. And also, they really won't be endangered very much by such a compromise because their military does control the Taiwan Straits. If we try to bring our military in there, specifically our carrier groups and other such capabilities, our naval capabilities, into the Taiwan Straits, they will be a sitting duck for the increasingly powerful Chinese missile force. If a war were to flare up, they will not survive. We don't have the capability to conduct a war so far from China, a conventional war so far from China. Hopefully both sides will refrain from a military confrontation. We might have certain advantages there, but it would be entirely risky to do that. If we attack China, with military forces, they would also retaliate. And they have enough capability in this area, and we'll have, of course, the hypersonic capability of Russia to rely upon in delivering missiles to the homeland of America. So I don't think risking a nuclear war makes sense. I don't think a conventional war close to the Taiwan Straits or in the Taiwan Straits makes any sense. I don't think we have the capability of defending the Taiwanese if they want to cross the straits. I don't think they can stop us. And of course, whatever increase in arms accrues to Taiwan over the next 2 years or so will not be able to make a defense against the huge numbers of Chinese troops they will be able to dispatch to Taiwan. I think the reunification of Taiwan with China is coming. I think the only way to put off the day of such a reunification is paradoxically to withdraw our military forces from this area and let nature take its course. The Chinese formerly have stated an intention to wait as long as till 2050 to reunify Taiwan and China. I think we should take that seriously and just let the natural relations of Taiwan and China develop. That way we'll probably get a later rather than an earlier situation where Taiwan is reunited with China. So really a peaceful policy in this area is more highly recommended by me anyway than a policy that contests China for Taiwan, contests with China for Taiwan. On the other hand, when it comes to the problems in the sea lanes and the excessive claims, of China, we no doubt should be continuing to pursue military action jointly, judicial action along with our allies to try to get international court decisions that rule in favor of the other powers in that area, so that control of the South China Sea is decided in a reasonable way according to international law. I think we ought to oppose violations of international law by the Chinese, but we should not try to create any violations of international law ourselves in that area, which we would do if we militarily opposed the reunification of China with Taiwan, its province. We must never forget, Taiwan is a province of China by common agreement. And I believe that we will see the victory on January 13th of the Kuomintang Party, and we will see them move towards a reunification with China. I think we should support that policy of the Kuomintang Party and not try to resist it. So that's my take on the matter. I'm going to go to your comments now. Andy Candy greets us, of course. Kay does also. Kay says, I'm sorry, my net is out again. Horny Eyes says, collecting souls, enter if you dare. Enter with your eyes as you've already seen too much. Antichrist is against you all. Have fun losing. Those were early comments in the 917 to 918 period. There's a comment by Kay Ryan. I should have my net cleared up in a couple of weeks. That will be wonderful, Kay. Well, if that's all, then I am going to call it, a night. This is a relatively early night for me. And the day after Christmas, that is actually very welcome. Tomorrow, I will be back with the Dump the Corruption show. I have a number of things already lined up for that show, but I have to decide what I'm going to focus on. Again. But I will decide. I will decide early tomorrow and schedule that show. So have fun overnight. I will see you tomorrow night. Even though Dee has not come to join us, I expect that Dee will be having a show of her own at 8 o'clock tomorrow. But her computer has been giving her trouble tonight. So there may be a problem with that. But right now I expect the show from Dee at 8 p.m. tomorrow and the show for myself at 9 p.m. tomorrow, a Dump the Corruption show. So for now, good night, have a wonderful evening, and I will see you tomorrow.